Party, which is an organisation set up by Unite the Union to fight for the people that they say they represent. The carers, the unemployed, the disabled, the people who have nothing in this society. Last time we were saying, we are many, they are few. This time we can say, we are many and they are fewer. They are fewer because they have no arguments. They have no truth. They talk about the blood running in the streets of Barnwood. In fact, I've looked at the facts and figures, and anyone can do that. In decades, there's been one asylum seeker accused of a sex crime. There have been hundreds and hundreds of sex-related crimes in this county. Asylum seekers make up 36 for every 10,000 residents in this county, and they're blamed for every social ill, every hardship, every problem, every crime that you can think of. And the reason behind that, is something which I learnt as a small child living in Brixton. I experienced the Brixton riots. My grandparents were both racist. My parents were both socialists. And they said to me, don't be scared of these people. They are being exploited. The landlords are ripping them off. Well, the landlords are not only ripping them off, they're ripping us off. £145 per person per day in an asylum seekers hostel, and sometimes 3 rooms. Well, I don't know what kind of luxury that is, but my union paid for me to go to the Hilton in Brighton, and it didn't cost £145. And I had access to food and all the facilities. So this is something which is an absolute lie, and it's also a total scandal. It's COVID all over again. Racketeering, profiteering. So when they say they want their country back, it was never their country, and it was never ours. I was also living in London in the 1970s. I remember Enoch Powell saying, rivers of blood. My grandmother used to say to me, they live in dustbins and they'll slit our throats in our beds. None of that has happened. We've had no rivers of blood, and we've got no blood running in our streets. But what we've seen is a hemorrhaging of public services. The NHS is not being ruined by a handful of refugees or migrants. Migrants are keeping the NHS running. Most care workers. That you will find in this county are from Africa, from Philippines, from other countries, from Eastern Europe. They are not British workers, because British workers cannot afford to live and will not live the way that those people do. Nor should they. We need to be fighting for equal pay for all, equal conditions for all, and equality. But we will not get that as long as this country is not our country. Our country means public ownership of the NHS. Kick out the profiteers. Kick out the profiteers that are charging a fortune for asylum seekers to live in terrible conditions. Kick out the landlords that are making fortunes out of people in social housing. Kick out all of those people that support cuts, drive cuts. Our union took up the question of fuel poverty. Where were they? They moan about the grannies and they say, oh, we care about them. Asylum seekers aren't responsible for the energy company making £61 billion profit last year. They talk about carers. I was a carer. £54 a week. Nigel Farage doesn't support carers. Nigel Farage doesn't support the NHS. Nigel Farage doesn't support public services. He's a millionaire. So's Tommy Robinson. He hasn't even got a job and he's a millionaire. Nigel Farage, give him his dues, he's an MP and he's got 11 other jobs. So he's a really hard worker. Unfortunately, he spends most of his time in America, so we don't see him put the graft in. Tommy Robinson lives in Spain. And these people listen to the rubbish that they spew, the hatred that they use, the divide and rule that I have known all my life. In the 1950s, in the 1960s with PAL, in the 1970s with the National Front. They're always scapegoating. They're always looking for people to blame. At the moment, it's the so-called illegals. They're not illegal, they're undocumented, and they make up 0.5% of the British population, and yet they're being blamed for absolutely everything. Well, I don't blame them, we don't blame them. We blame the bosses, we blame the governments, successive governments that have imposed cuts and privatisation. The NHS has got £80 billion debt due to private finance initiatives. That's the scandal that people should be campaigning about. The scandals that we all know about, they do not know about apparently. And I would say that the people gathered down there are racist. But not everyone that supports reform is a racist. Not everyone who's worried about refugees. We've got the media against them. Last time the BBC refused to speak to any trade unionist at Shire Hall. Why? Why did they depict our demonstration, which was 10 times as big as the others, as being roughly the same size? Because they, the media, along with the politicians, supporting a system that is based on profit, that has no value for human life. And if we think it's just asylum seekers, it's not. It will be migrants, it will be women. They talk about caring for women. Where were they when all of the rape crisis centres were closed and the women's services were closed? Where were they when the children's services were cut? Why aren't they demanding more social workers, more youth workers, more money for schools? They don't care. The billionaires, the millionaires behind them don't care, and they are being exploited just as we are. So I don't normally say whose streets are they, because they're not really our streets, but they're certainly not theirs.